Good morning, everyone. This is Amy Recker from the Student Information State Support Team. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, Janice will be doing the March EMIS webinar. And on Thursday, on the 4th, Devin at 9 o'clock will be covering homerooms and elementary scheduling. And then on March 11th, at 9 o'clock, Devin will be going over lockers. So that's some of the upcoming things that are going to be happening. Today, we're going to be going over graduation verification. Some people do kind of mix that with the graduation points, and it is a separate module. So we are just going to be going over graduation verification, also known as graduation eligibility. Those two are kind of used interchangeably. If you're interested in knowing about graduation points, Devin did that training last fall, and there is that recording out on the customer portal. So you should be seeing the course maintenance menu in the application. There are several, in order to use the graduation verification, the module is optional, and you can use which parts of it that you wish to use or track, be it all of it, none of it, or pieces of it. One of the things to keep in mind if you are going to be using it is there are 3 different ways you can categorize your courses. And again, which way you do it, or if you use all of them, is up to you. First, there is the course area of study, the typical maintenance screen here, and they have their courses here by area of study broken out. There is also the department, course department. One thing to keep in mind is that the course department is not a field on manual course history. So if you're using department as your main way of categorizing your courses, keep in mind that that field is not stored on manual course history. So when you go to use a graduation verification module, it's not going to pick up or see any of your manual course history. And then the third one is course subject area, and this particular building isn't using them, so there's none set up. One thing to keep in mind, whichever one, if you're using one or all 3, or what they decide to do, is that either the course area or subject area or department needs to be set up not only in the current year, but every prior year that you want to grab information for a student. So if you have a senior, you're going to want to make sure you not only have the current year, but the previous 3 years, if not 4 or 5, depending on if you're going to be grabbing, if they have any junior high information that would apply. So it is important. Sometimes the initial setup may seem a little bit overwhelming, but once it's set up and you do school year initialization, that information will roll over from year to year. So once it's initially set up, you're good to go. So if we look at some courses here, and just do a general search and you get your list of courses, I'm just going to pick on one and edit it. One thing to keep in mind is you are going to want to have is high school credit is one of the key fields that it's going to zero in on, and that's on the general tab. And then on the miscellaneous tab, this is where you can specify your department, area of study, or subject area, depending if or whatever you're using. Now, if you're only using the GradVer for things that are non-course related, obviously this isn't an issue. But if you are going to be using the course part of it, you are going to want to make sure that you have this set up appropriately. And again, this is going to have to be in the current year and the previous years back that you're going to be using to calculate into your graduation verification. Also on this particular tab is a field called in graduation eligibility, and that must be checked in order for the course to be considered into the calculation as well. And as I mentioned earlier, graduation eligibility and graduation verification are kind of like used interchangeably. So And then if we jump over to the EMIS tab, these field here are called core subject area. If you are going to be using the total core credits element, which we will be discussing in a little bit, it is going to be using this value. So you are going to want to have the core subject area value populated on the EMIS tab for the applicable courses in the current year and again in the previous years. Terry, is the checklist for use graduation eligibility procedural checklist? Yes, that is the checklist. I'm not going to follow it task by task or page by page, but that is what I used as my reference in the information that I'm going through. You're welcome. There are some reports that you can run that will give you some information. Within the application, there is the course report for course curriculum. You can enter several different filters, but down here you can go to fields to display and you can pull specific fields up to 10 that are applicable to whichever information you're looking for. So in this case, I ran it for is high school credit, and I included the department area of study, subject area, including graduation verification and the core subject area. So I just ran it the other day to save some time here. So I'm pulling that up. So it gives you your list of your course codes, the course name, grade levels that are applicable for that course, and then whatever fields that you decided to pull. So you can check and at a glance see to make sure that they are set to the correct value. There's also in the ad hoc or analytics hub, under the scheduling folder, there is also a course detail. Now you can run this as well, and here is what that'll look like. The filters are popping up here, but I ran that earlier too, just to save some time. So, you know, the filters are real simple for this report. It's just the school year and then the school name, and it'll pull the course detail. So this is what one of those would look like. Yeah, popped up on my side screen here. So it just gives you the information, and it actually gives you all the fields that are associated with a course, all the tabs, all the fields. So that is all included. And so you can go and drill down, like this first one that's showing here, it is high school credit. You can zero in and look at specific. So whatever report you wish to look at, they're just handy tools for at a glance looking at certain values on the course records. So any questions so far? I don't see anybody typing, so feel free to ask anytime. So we're going to go over to the core overflow. If you choose to use the total core credits element, which we'll discuss in a minute, there's some little bit of setup involved in that. You can use a core overflow from a prior year, or you can set up a new one for each year. It's just individual preference. What I did was I added a new one just for the specific school year. So you have, you give it a name, and then it will give you, you tell it based on the core subject area. Remember, that was one of those fields that you needed to fill in on the EMIS tab of the course, what value is required for it. So in this particular case, just going down, these first ones are 0, but for electives, we're saying they need to have 5. English, they need to have 4 credits. Fine arts, they need to have, that's not fine arts, that's not right for 4 credits. I'm having a brain freeze on what FAR stands for, but so down here on the math advanced, they need to have 1. For the other math areas, they need to have 3, etc. And then on the subject area overflow, you can specify, okay, so if they have more credits in a particular area, where you want those extra credits to overflow to. So for example, in the math, they're saying they need 1 for advanced math. Well, say they have 3. Well, you want the overflow to go to the math other. So down on math other, there's 3 credits that are required. So it's just saying if you have more for credits for a particular area, where do you want those credits to overflow to? And then for other, it's the electives is the catch-all bucket. So that is core overflow. One of the other items, if you choose to use it, is you can set up some miscellaneous items. And those, you can set them up either that they have true, false. They've either done it or met that requirement, or they haven't. Or you can set up numeric ones. These do need to be filled in manually. So for each student, for example, this school didn't have any set up. So I set up a meet and a port for a portfolio and meet with the counselor for examples. So if you look at the meet one, I have it that they need to meet with the counselor and it's numeric data type. So when we set up that element on the particular rule, it's going to be, the setup is going to be based on a numeric setup, and we'll be going over that shortly. And then I did the portfolio one. It's basically true, false. It's like they either did it or they didn't do it. But if we just pick on a student and go to their miscellaneous items page, every student is going to have these miscellaneous values and they're blank to begin with. And you have to manually go in here and set them. So that's just one thing, little caveat you need to keep in mind if you're using the miscellaneous items, the values need to be manually updated on each student. There's no mass update to say, okay, I want the portfolio to be set true for, all the students or something, or all 12th graders. There's no bulk update in that sense. So you would have to manually come in each student and manually adjust these values. And we'll come back to that in a minute as well. So that's some miscellaneous items. Also, there is the community service. There's no real setup involved, but if you are going to be tracking community service, that is manual as well. You would have to come to the community service hours page and manually add those records. And we'll cover those in a little bit as well in more detail. So now if we go to the rule maintenance, we covered the core overflow and the miscellaneous items. We're going to go over to rule maintenance. And this is where you set up the rule for your graduation eligibility. And this is basically the nuts and bolts of this particular application. So you can set up so that you have a separate rule for each year, or you can set it up that, you keep using the same one over and over and just keep adjusting the same one. If you look, there's the original 2013 and 2014 core. I added a 2021, but you can just click on this copy rule. If this the little double paper icon. And basically that is going to be a copy of however 2014 is set up. So that's what I used as my basis for the 2021. And then you can give it a code, XYZ, XYZ. because I already have a 2021, I'm just putting fictitious codes in here, and you could click save, and that would give you the start or the basis for your rule. The other icons here are the trash can icon, which lets you delete it or inactivate it. There's the edit pencil to edit the specific rule. And then there's a little wrench icon, which is where you add all the setup to the particular rules. If we click on my 2021 and go to on the edit pencil, so you see I just had my code in the name, a description, meet requirements text and does not meet requirements text is what's going to show on the report card that you can, if you want this information to show on the report card, it will put that little statement or text on there. The maximum credit groups, this tab is not being used at this time. It's not functioning or functionable, so that can just be disregarded. And if you are going to be using the total core credits line item options, there's a tab for that. You can specify your core overflow rule. And again, we set up a new one. So I would pick the 2021. And then you can have options for your credit selection. And this is going to apply to all total core credit elements. Do you want to include current courses? And then there's little informational notes over here to the right. If you're wondering, okay, what does it mean include current courses? Well, it's going to include that credit for the courses that are currently in progress. So missing marks handling. If a particular course you're going to be pulling does not have a mark, what do you want the application to process it as? Do you want to project that the student's going to pass it or project that the student's going to fail the current course? Do you want to include current requests? This would probably be more applicable, say you're in the first semester of your school year and you want to know if you're going to tell it if you want to include the requests for classes that are in the second semester or the second half of the school year, if you'd want to include those requests. And then if you want to include ones that are only marked high school credit only, if you want to include those as well, or only those that are marked high school credit. So we click save. So that is the gist of setting up the rule. Well, now we want to look at all the details. So we're going to look at the setup. And when you start from the get-go, there's no line items here. There's nothing here. You can set these up at the district level or the rules at the district level or at a building level. The only thing you got to keep in mind is if you do it at the district level, everything has to be set up at the district level. All the areas of study, all the departments, all the subject areas, pieces that you're using all have to be set up at the district level. And usually this is only used at the high school level. So it's really going to only be a factor if it's a large district that has multiple high schools and if they each want to do their own thing, okay. But if you want to do it consistently across the district, well, then you would have to do all this setup at the district level versus a building level. So just something to keep in mind. So for here, all these line items, some of you that have been around for a while know that this kind of the logistics that we use for creating these line items, we've kind of simplified them over the years. It is a lot easier to troubleshoot if a student is not meeting a specific line item, if you have them drilled down and not all intermixed and intertwined. If you would put all these subject areas like, health, English, math, science, social studies together in one line item, and then the student doesn't meet it, you have to, it's like, okay, it just says it either met it or it didn't meet it. So you would need to do a lot of troubleshooting to drill down to where, like if a course isn't set correctly or, the student passed or failed the course, so it's not including that credit or what have you. So we've learned that it's a lot easier to break the line items down by each, like either subject or the particular element that you want to drill down on. So, And again, I did a copy of the 2014, but then I kind of added, I wanted to make sure there was examples of all the elements. So that's why some of these might seem a little redundant, but when we get to those, but I just want to show that you can use all the elements. So I'm just going to start at the top here with my health element. So I'm going to click on the wrench. Oh, let me just jump back here for a minute. So if we click on the edit pencil for one of these element or line items, all it basically is a description. That's all, you know. So if we look at any of these, that says health. If you look at this one, it says English. That's all there is to it. So there's no logic yet behind each particular line item. That is done with the wrench or the setup. I just want to make sure that was clear. So if we click on the wrench, you can specify different elements that you want for each item. So of the elements that are available, there's assessment, community service, course, exemption, GPA, miscellaneous, total credits, and then the total core credits. So as I go through, I have examples of all of them within my line items. So for the most part, all the subject area items, like for health, for example, we have it set that we selected total core credits. It's saying that we need to have greater than or equal to a half a credit. We're doing the core area of study, and we picked to the health. And then notice this part here, that is coming from that core overflow that we set up, those defaults. And if you're like, where was that? So I'll just show you real quick. We go to the core overflow and we look at the 2021. Whoops, I'm sorry. Went to the wrong page. If we go to here, total core credits, line item options, this is where it's pulling, include current courses, missing marks, pass, include current requests, and in high school credit only. So if we jump back to our rule, so IC, if you look at this little handy legend here that they list here, IC is for include current courses. Pass is for, it's not in the legend, but that's for that missing marks handling that you say project pass. IR is include requests, and HS is high school credit courses only. So if we edit this item, this is where you specify total core credits. You want it to be a half. So it's greater than or equal to a half a credit. Which core subject area do you want it to apply to? And we said health education. And that's the only one in this element, only element in this particular line item. So if the student does not meet this, we know he either did not take the health course or take any course that had that core subject area, or they took it and they didn't pass it, but they did not earn credit for that. So when we do troubleshooting, that's very easy to, you know, zero in on. Then you're not looking at all the core subject areas, and if they didn't meet this particular health one, then you would know that you only could you'd only have to drill down on that one area. So some of these are going to be very similar. So if we go to English, it's basically total core credits greater than or equal to 4 credits of the ENG core subject area. And again, you're going to have the include current courses, missing marks pass, requests, and high school credit. And if we click on the edit pencil, you'll see that it's just basically saying the 4 credits and the English language arts core subject area. And again, that's just one element. So if they didn't pass it, you just have to drill down on, you know, those course subjects that the student took, and that compare that to the core subject area for the English language arts. Math is just slightly different. They're still using the total core credits, and we're saying they need to have 1 credit, but the MTA is of the advanced math. So they need to have at least 1 credit of advanced math, and then 3 credits of some other of the other math courses that are available. So if we just click on the edit pencil again, you'll see where it's just 1 credit, and then they selected the MTA or mathematics advanced core subject area. Now notice there's 2 line items in this one, or excuse me, 2 lines in this particular line item. They are together with the operator, and you can choose and or. So if you have multiple lines, you can specify if they can meet optional criteria or required criteria. So I say required is and. They have to do, they have to have 1 credit of the advanced math and with this element, and 3 credits of other math classes. If we edit this second one, you'll notice the operator and is selected here. If we did or and save, notice this, that instead of and, it says or here. And then that's saying basically they only need to have 1 or the other. So sometimes if you're like, well, this isn't coming out right, where I'm not getting the results I want, that's ways to drill down and things to check is if you got more than a couple criteria, that are they together with and or. So we want to change this one and make it and again. In a little bit, I'll go through some examples of I want to say a little bit more complicated items. But this is just basically saying they need to have A and B. They need to have 1 credit of the math advanced and 3 of the other math. So now on to phys ed. And we're introducing some more different elements. We still have the original total core credits of a half a credit of the phys ed. Or notice we have a new element here. We're choosing or. They either need to have the half credit or they can have the exemption from PE set to true. So if we look at exemptions, you have 3 exemptions to pick from: phys ed, fine arts, or the econ financial literacy. So when you select it, it's automatically, you just select it, it's going to say or if that exemption is true. So in this case, they need to have either the phys ed or the exemption set to true. One thing to keep in mind with these exceptions, if we go to a student's profile page on their FN graduate tab, that is where you specify the exemptions. And again, that's a manual. You'll need to do that. Is you can go here and you can specify, here's where you can specify an exemption from the econ financial literacy, the fine arts, and there's also the phys ed. And that is stored on the FN graduate tab of the profile. So if we just look at the PE one more time, you'll see in this case, they need to either have the half credit or the exemption needs to be true on their profile page in order to meet this particular element or this particular line item. Okay, now on to science. So now science, notice we have 3 criteria. They're all the total core credits, but they're in different subject areas. So in this case, we're saying they need to have 1 credit of the life science, at least 1 credit of the physical science, and at least 1 credit of advanced science. And notice these are all connected with and. So you need to have all 3 of these in order to pass this particular line item. One thing to keep in mind is when you're using and, it's basically A plus B plus C in order to pass it. If you want to have where multiple things could be a possibility, there is ways, kind of like an algebraic equation, a way to group your elements. So look here, these are all ands, so you don't need to group them separately. So you could see these little particular arrows down here in the little legend where it says where you can move your line items up and down. You can also indent and outdent. And you're like, okay, what is indent and outdent? For those that are not as familiar with this, it's kind of like an algebraic equation. If you click this arrow, notice there's no parentheses. So if we click the arrow, it indents and it puts a parentheses around this particular line item. Now, in this particular case, that doesn't really make sense, but say you wanted to group them, you could notice the parentheses moved from here, and now instead of being being here, it is down on the second row because we indented the second row. So that's grouping these first two items together. And then if we did the arrow again for the third item, notice the closed parentheses moves down to the end of the third item. So see, it's grouping these three items together. Since these are and elements, this is basically the same as what it was when we came to this page because it's grouping them all together. The key thing with these elements is if you change it, use the or operand. So I'm going to get it back to where it was in the beginning when we first came to this page. So there's no parentheses. I'm going to take this middle one and change my scenario and say I want to change it to an or. So it's saying this right now, what they want is 1 core of life or excuse me, 1 credit of life science or 1 credit of physical science, and then at least 1 credit of the advanced. Well, without the parentheses, the process gets confused on how you want that to calculate. So using our algebraic equations, we're going to group some of these elements together. So we want the first one, we want the student only needs to take either life or physical. So we need to indent those. So you see that the parentheses are grouping these 2 lines together. So it's going to say, okay, the student needs to have 1 credit of life science or 1 credit of physical science. Okay, did it meet that? And then it's going to go to this last one where it's an and regardless, it also needs to have 1 credit of an advanced science. So it's real important if you're not getting the results that you expect when you calculate the student eligibility, you need to look at the line item that's not being met, but then drill down on the elements and make sure that it is set up correctly so it's being interpreted correctly. The key thing is when you're using and or elements together, that's when you're going to want to use this indent and outdent to, because like this one isn't indented at all because it's just by itself. It's an element all by itself. These first 2 are to be considered and work together. That's why they get the parentheses. So people understand that the more complicated these are, the harder they are to troubleshoot. So that's why we always recommend, keeping each subject area separate and keeping the number of criteria in your elements down to not having, like 10 elements here that you've got to try to coordinate. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody typing, so if any questions come to mind, let me know. But I am going to set this back to the way I had it originally. Okay, So this is basically back to the way I had it originally. They just need 1 credit of life science, 1 of physical science, and 1 of advanced. Okay, so on to social studies. This is real similar to the science where they need a half credit of a history and a half credit of government, and then 2 credits of some other form of social studies subject area. On to electives. We're doing total core credits, and they're saying they just need to have 5 electives. So we had the core set up. So if the students got extra credits in particular areas, that they would overflow to the electives bucket. Econ and financial literacy. Here we're saying a particular course. So if we do the edit pencil, we are saying a particular course. You do need to know the course code. If you don't, you can use the ellipse and go search for it. But you enter the particular code, and that means that student needs to complete and pass that particular course. And then you can specify if you want to include current courses as well as current requests. Or in this particular case, they can have the exemption for the econ and financial literacy set to 2. So they can either take and pass the course, or they can a specific course. So one thing to keep in mind when you use the course, if your course code change, then you're going to need to make sure you change this as well. And again, these exemption is one of the exemptions that are on the profile graduation tab. Then we have fine arts. And again, total core credits, they need to have 1 credit of fine arts, and then, or the exemption for fine arts set to true. Total core credits. So this is saying across all subject areas, they need to have at least 20 credits. And this might look a little different in the sense that we specified 20, but we pulled over a whole bunch of core subject areas, all the ones that would apply. So they need to, between all these core subject areas, they need to have at least 20 credits. You would only use one or the other, but there was the total core credits that we just pulled up here. There's also a total credits, and that was around before the whole core overflow and total core credits element came about. So if we look at total credits, you can do it the same way. You can specify how many credits. Since you're not going off that total core credits setup, you can specify here if you want to include current courses, missing marks, handling requests, and high school credit. Then you can specify your areas of study. Remember, they didn't have any course subject areas set up, so this is blank. Or you can filter on departments. And again, remember that manual co-high doesn't have departments on it. So if you choose this, it is not going to include those courses or the manual co-high. Or you can use the core subject area. I just did it to match the other total core credits, but you can use, they'd probably use one or the other. They probably wouldn't use both, but I just wanted to show you an example of using the total credits. Okay, on to OGT. This is going to be using the assessment element. When we go down the list of elements here, this is the assessment element. You can specify the different areas of the OGT for those students that are still taking it. And then notice over here, it says default minimum score. So if we edit this record, yes, ACT is not included in that list. That is something that is an enhancement that still might be coming. So, so if we look at math, so you pick OGT. So if you don't really have any students, or you don't want to include this as part of the graduation eligibility, you don't even need to have a rule set up for this. I just wanted to show you all the different examples that were available. So notice it says minimum score here, and it says optional. Specify minimum score to override the assessment part default minimum score. So if you leave this blank, it's going to go over to the assessment standards page and say, okay, what's the minimum score for math? It's 400. Is the minimum to pass it. So if the student has above a 400, it's going to say pass. If you put in for a minimum score of 400 in here and save, that's okay. But then if that minimum score changes on the assessment standards page, then you need to say it changes it to that the minimum score is now 420. Then you would have to come in here and manually modify this to make sure that it's picking up the new minimum. Or if the minimum went down to 390, you'd want to make sure that it's picking up the correct minimum. So if you specify a minimum score here, then you need to make sure that you check it yearly to make sure that that value is still accurate based on the assessment standards. Otherwise, if you just leave it blank, it will go and look, okay, for that year, the minimum for math was 400. The student has 405. Okay, they pass. So that's why we recommend just using the default minimum score. So you don't have to keep coming back here and manually checking this or updating it. So I'm going to leave it blank. And notice all of these have the and, so we don't need any of the parentheses or anything. It's just saying, you know, they need to basically have a default minimum score for the math, reading, science, social studies, science, and writing areas. Okay, on to miscellaneous items. So I did I added those elements, so I wanted to come in here. So I'm going to set them up. So you're specifying the miscellaneous type of, for this first one is the portfolio. And notice, since it was a true false setup, when we set it up on the miscellaneous items page, then it's going to say, okay, for what do they, to pass this, should their value be true or false? So we're saying true. And then if they don't have that value, how do you want to treat it then? So I said, if they don't have any value, then treat it as if it's false. So if that value isn't manually changed to true, then that means they have not done completed that item. So, and on to the miscellaneous item for the meet with the counselor. Remember that was set to numeric. So I have it chose what is the value to meet that. One thing, little caveat about this is that it is an exact number. So notice up here in my rule, it says required value 2. So if you put in that the student met with the counselor 3 times, it's not, that may have exceeded this, but the rule, if you use numeric, it is a precise. It's not a greater than an equal, it's an equal. So in order to meet this, it has to be equal. I did notice there was something in the documentation I do need to update with that. But I have an example set up where it is that this value is set to 3 and the student didn't meet it because the value needs to be a specific value. So that's just a little caveat that you need to keep in mind if you're using the numeric missing items value. And then the missing, or to handle a missing value, I have treated as 0. So those are miscellaneous items. We already covered total credits. For GPA, you specify your element is a GPA, and you can specify which GPA set you want it to be. We're doing the cumulative grade GPA set, and then I have greater than or equal to 2.0. So the student, for when you calculate that specific GPA set, their GPA needs to be greater than or equal to 2.0 in order to pass this line item. And then the last one, last but not least, is community service. And you need to, as I mentioned earlier, manually update that community service value for the student. And I'm just saying greater than or equal to 10. So if it can be, 10 or higher, and they will meet this particular line item. So any questions about, this is basically the nuts and bolts of the graduation eligibility rule setup. Okay, so now we have, you know, a rule set up, and we want to get it attached to a student, to the students. There's multiple ways you can do this. So there is a bulk way to do it. Well, let me just first show you on the student profile. On the additional tab. This is where it's stored for the student. So it says primary or graduation rule, and then the alternate graduation rule. You don't have to set both, just set one. But I just want to say my little example student here doesn't have any set. So you can manually go to the screen and set it if you just need to do one student. In bulk, there is also graduation, or excuse me, eligibility rule assignments. And in this particular page, you can assign a rule to a group of students. You can either have them in a particular ad hoc membership, you can filter by grade level, active students only, ones that already have a certain role and you want to basically change that role. I'm just going to do grade 12 students because my little test student here is in grade 12, and do search. And so it's pulling up all my grade 12 students. Excuse me, notice on the far left here, all the check boxes. If you check the one at the top, we'll check all the students. And if you uncheck it, it won't uncheck all the students, or you can just check one at a time. It's basically saying these students do not have a primary rule or secondary rule already assigned. So what I want to do is make the primary rule 2020, or excuse me, 2021. And then there's an option here if the student already has a primary role, if you want to override it. If the student, if you do already has a role and you do not check this, it's not going to change it. So it's as a precaution, if you want it to be 2021, no matter what, if you check that, that way all your bases are covered. So if they have no rule or they have a different rule, you can change and override that. Well, we're just going to do my one student for time wise. So I'm just going to do Heidi Dickerson. So I'm updating my one student. So if I go look at her profile additional tab, it shows that her primary role is there. Her primary graduation rule is set to 2021. There's also the student profile bulk update. You put the students that you want to in an ad hoc membership. And I'm just going to pick one and go on. And on the student record, this is where, excuse me, whoops. This is where you can specify and bulk update the primary or alternate graduation rule for students. So it's another way to bulk update a group of students. The one other option is building grade level page. And this might be easy to like wonder why it's why we're going to that page. But for building grade levels, so I'm going to pick grade 12, you can specify, it says grade specific registration default data. So if you register a 12th grader, you can specify that you want their primary graduation rule to be 2021. So that's just another way to get some of those information manually automatically updated without having to hit each student. Just as a reminder, with there's ways to bulk update the primary and alternate graduation rule on the students. If you are using the miscellaneous values, the community service, or the exemptions, those do need to be updated manually. So we are going to go to this student's graduation eligibility page. Whoops. And notice her miscellaneous values. Notice I purposely set this as for an example. I have that she met with the counselor 3 times. And remember, we had it set that you need to do 2. And I have that portfolio needs to be true. Well, it's blank in this case. So I just wanted to show you that. So you come to the student eligibility details for particular student. You pick what rule you want to calculate. In the current year, what kind of mark type do you want to use for the current year credit? So we're just going to do a quarter mark. I want to recalculate and I want to see the details. So we're going to click view eligibility. And I'll pop up here. And basically it said overall for this rule, the student has not met it. Okay, so you say, okay, so what does the student still need? So you can go line item by line item, and this is where the troubleshooting and setting them up separate makes it so much easier, because you can eliminate what is working or not what you have to look at. So you can zero in on what you do need to look at. So for the math line item, the student has met that. And notice there's columns here for student and then what the required value needs to be. So it's basically, it'll tell you the details, like for advanced math, the student has 1 credit and 1 is required. And then for the other math, 3 credits is required, and they have 3 and 3 required. So they've met that. So that's all good. Phys ed. Notice here we had the or, they either needed to take the course, which they did not do, saying 0 credits here, and or the exemption from PE has to be true, which it is false. So notice PE, the student has not passed PE. So that's one item we need to check into. For health, was only 1 line item where they had to take a health course, and for a half credit, which they did meet. For English, it shows that they've met their English. They've had 4 credits and they got 4 credits. For science, they've met as well. They have all the necessary for life, physical, and advanced sciences. And for social studies, they've passed that as well. They've had the history, government, and the 2 credits for other social studies courses. Electives, they needed to have 5 electives, and they've got 12.42. So they've more than exceeded that. Financial literacy, they either needed to take the course, which was OHO 333, which it says they have. So they don't need to worry about the exemption because they've already taken the course. So they've met that line item as well. So now we're on to fine arts. They needed to have 1 credit in it. They have 2, so they've met that. Again, no need to worry about the exemption because they have met the credits. Total core credits, they need to have 20 and they have 28.92. So they've far exceeded that as well. So now we're to the OGT, and it says that the student has not passed that. And if we look down for each area, they did not pass the writing area. So that is why they have not met that particular line item. For miscellaneous, they did not meet their miscellaneous either. It's saying for the portfolio, it needs to be true and is currently false because we had blank, and then we set it to that if it's blank, presume false or that they didn't do it. And then with meeting with the counselor, we said it needed to be 2 and it was 3. So that's just a little caveat you got to keep in mind if you use the numeric miscellaneous items setup. For total credits, we showed that as an example, and they needed to have 20 and they have the 28.93. So they have exceeded that. GPA, they needed to have at least a 2.0 and they have a 4.0. And for community service, we said they needed to have 10, but they only got 5. So those are 4 areas: the phys ed, the OGT assessment, the miscellaneous, and the community service that we need to drill down on. and see what's up with those. Over here to the far right, you can choose show menu, and then you can drill down on the specific areas. So for community service, for example, it's showing here are our community service records, and it's saying these are the records that I entered on their community service page for the student. And notice the student overall does have 10 hours, but this particular one was not marked in graduation eligibility. So we will go back and say, oh, that was a mistake. It should be included. So we will go back and adjust that. One thing for miscellaneous items, I just realized yesterday, this is not working. So if you click on miscellaneous for those miscellaneous items and click refresh, nothing's showing up here. So that is a defect. It should be looking like the community page. So I need to get a defect entered for that. But it should be showing the miscellaneous eligibility items, the portfolio and the meet and what values a student currently has, and it's not. So I need to get something entered for that. For the OGTs, that would be under the assessments, and I'm going to choose OGT, and then it tells me that the student only got a score of 398 in writing. So that's why they didn't pass that. And then for phys ed, if we look under the assignments, if we want to look under any particular area, we're going to do area of study and look. Notice that's why they don't have the exemption set, and they don't have any, they basically didn't take phys ed. So in order to adjust all these, let's go to the profile, and we're going to go to the graduate tab, and we're going to say that this student has the exemption or is exempted for phys ed. So that'll take care of that item. If we look at the student's assessments, you can either, add a record. I'm just going to change the writing OGT that the student passed it. Obviously, they would take it again if they hadn't passed that particular area. So now they have passed all the OGTs. If we go to the miscellaneous items, we're going. I should be an edit pencil on here. So I want to go and I'm going to set this to true and set this value to 2 and say save. So now they've met with the counselor 2 times. That'll meet that area, and the portfolio is true. And community service. If we look at their community service, notice here, this particular record does not have does not count towards it. So we're going to edit that record, and we're going to say, yes, include in the graduation eligibility calculation, these 5 hours. So now they not only have 10 hours, but all 10 are counting towards the graduation eligibility. So if we go back to the students' eligibility details and recalculate it, now it says the student has met that rule. They have met every line item that is incorporated into that rule. And it's like I said, you may say, oh, that's a lot of line items, but it's so much easier to troubleshoot. It's to drill down on one particular area than to say, oh, okay, they don't have enough credits. Well, where would you begin with that? So it's a lot easier to drill down and have each particular subject area set up as a line item. Just a couple other things to cover, and we'll wrap up. There are some reports that you can run. So there's the R208, which is the eligibility report. You can run it for a group of students or an individual student, like I did yesterday. You can, if you want to look for just students that are eligible, that do meet all the requirements, those that have not, that are not, or basically ineligible, or both. And then there's different kind of filters you can pick on based on their primary. I did their primary role in of 2021. And I wanted to recalculate it and specify basically, so it's grabbing the latest and greatest information. So this is what the report looks like, the R208. And basically it's showing, and I ran this yesterday, obviously before this, we modified the student today and changed it that they met all the requirements. So it's going to show the requirements on here that weren't met, like the phys ed isn't met on here because I ran it yesterday. And at the end, it has a summary that it's ineligible. The other couple other things are, there's the eligibility letters. And Terry, I'll get to your question in just a minute. Eligibility letters, if you want to send out letters regarding the students, again, you choose your rule that you want to be included. I filtered and ran it just for a student and refreshed and recalculated. And again, this was yesterday. So this is saying that the student did not meet, basically did not meet the requirements at that particular point in time. The two other items is that you can get the items to show on the report cards. There's certain layouts that already have that piece of information included, and all year 2 is one of them. Again, you enter your filters, and then there's an area on the page where you can specify that which graduation rule you want to include, etc., and show you what that looks like. This is what it looks like. It just says graduation ability or eligibility, what the rule name is, and then on that page it says that the student did not meet the requirements. And then the last one is the transcript. Again, there's a format that already has that information on it if you want to use it. And again, it's that same filtering on the rule and the mark type. And if you want to recalculate, and if we drill down to, it's the credit summary area, this credit summary here, it gives you all the information like English, what was required and what they currently have. And it drills down to all your specific line items. So that's showing it on the particular reports. And Terry has a question. I thought I heard you say that you have to manually update the exemptions on the graduate tab, but can't you use the student profile block update? Yes, you are right, Terry. You can use, as soon as I think I was like, that came to mind that you can use a student profile block update to update any of those exemptions on the profile. But you are correct. Also, when and where is the grad points training video? Okay, I will show you out on the customer portal. Pull that up. If we go under product, or excuse me, training and webinars, if we go under SI module training, that folder, that's where all our videos are. And graduation was last fall. So here, the 10/1 of 2020 was the graduation points training. So that is where you would see that. And that's where I will post. Right now it's the 2020 version of this training, and I will post an updated version on that as well. Thank you. So any other questions? I know I ran right up to 10, but it's a lot to cover in an hour. But that's basically graduation eligibility / verification in a nutshell. Thanks all of you for attending, and I'll get that, hopefully the certificates generated out to you today, as well as get the recording posted out on the customer portal. So thank you and have a good afternoon, or good rest of your morning and afternoon. Thank you all for attending.